Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome one, welcome all to the Shakespeare stream. I hope that everybody's doing great. Like I said with the premiere earlier, I said that I would probably be streaming later, and so alas, here I am. Um, now, hello to everyone, especially in YouTube chat. Glad to see everybody there. Um, it's funny because I was like, oh, like I'll hang out in VC for a little bit. And I actually ended up having a quite interesting conversation about the origin of the Zapatistas and Mexican history. And I'm like, I was like, okay, yeah, I probably should just stream because otherwise, like, I'm just gonna give history lessons in VC all day. So anyway, Shabbat Shalom for everybody that celebrates. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos. I hope that you're all having a wonderful, wonderful Friday. Hello, hello. So today I thought it would be an interesting, because I kind of wanted to broach the subject a little bit. Hello, the anti-corporatist. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to go into the sort of some of the history that I'm actually going to be going over in depth as well for my own article series, which is on my Substack, which is the history of Zionism in Palestine. That's the title of the series, right? And currently, the introduction came out last week, and it's just giving the context of the 5 years before the history itself, right? Like the historiographical, intervention that I'm doing begins, right? So it starts in 1912. That's the introduction, and then it ends just as the Balfour Declaration is, promulgated. And so this next part will be from 1917 to 1920. Oh, I'm sorry about your headache, anti-corporatist. Like usually, I know this might seem I don't know. This is like Mexican mother advice, but I was always told to like like a Mexican soda like in the glass bottle, to get that and just squeeze some lime into it and then drink the whole thing, and that will get rid of your headache. I don't know if that actually works because I've been told that like caffeine is actually bad for headaches, but I don't know. I've also been told that coffee is supposed to wake you up, and it does the Mexican thing to me. That is to say, it literally puts me to sleep. So so there's that. You can also so you can always take that with a. Also, Philippe Auguste Deuxième, I will answer your question. It's funny because I felt like later on in my premiere, I kind of answered some of your question, and I was like, I wonder if Philippe, but I'm pretty much sugar free. Yeah, no worries, no worries. Yeah, hydrating. I think that's what's at the heart of it, right? Is hydration. But yeah, no, if you're sugar free, then just, yeah, you don't need it. Yeah. So for today, or for tonight, I should say, for this Shabbos, Uncle Moisha, no, for, what I wanted to go over was I wanted to go over a fact that I spoke about. Okay, good, I'm glad. Something I just mentioned, in, Left of the Boxes stream, which is that 12% of the Israeli population, and again, if my math is wrong, please, by all means, feel free to correct me. I will always defer to the experts, but I did the the figures, and it's about 12% of Israel's Jewish population only, right? So the Israeli Jewish population has left the state of Israel since October 8th, right? So the day after. to the point where the former prime minister, many people say the future prime minister of the state. Okay. Yeah, yeah, sure. And I'm always more than happy to answer those questions. Thank you for opening up a thread that actually makes it like easier for me to respond to it. So yeah, I will definitely, and I will definitely link some sources too that I think might be very useful. Um, oh, yeah. No worries, no worries. So the former prime minister who was in the government that collapsed and then had elections that put Netanyahu back in power. And I think it's actually Jenny Ortega. Oh. um. So the former prime minister, many people say the future prime minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, um, literally went on Israeli TV and was essentially like Jeb Bushing. That's the best way how I could put that. He was like, "Please don't leave Israel," because apparently their economy is collapsing. Apparently the Israeli economy is collapsing. Hello, FLFNF. Welcome in, welcome in. It's good to see you. So, he's like, you guys shouldn't leave. We kind of need you guys to stay here. So about 600,000 people have left Israel already from the Jewish Israeli population. And they've all gone to, presumably European countries, or a lot of them go to the United States. But yeah, I just thought that was a very like kind of funny, weird thing to see, like a prime minister be like, "Please don't leave," like I don't know, it was just so weird. New Jersey, I mean, everybody knows what Central New Jersey is all about, okay? We all know about Central New Jersey. Nobody ever talks about it, but we all know what it's all about. Israeli embassies are really going to push hard on those trips. Oh, um, like, I know that now more than ever, the Jewish Agency for Israel, as it's called, which used to be called the Jewish Agency for Palestine. So whenever Zionists say, "Oh, it was never called that," it's like, well, then why did you change your name then? They are like literally trying, and American Jewish people are the least likely to immigrate to the state of Israel. Like there's no reason to. There's no reason to. But they're like really trying to go after just like Argentine Jews, like just going after everybody right now to try to get them to make Aliyah, and it's just like, just stop, it's like, instead of dealing with Israelis use tunnel. Yeah, oh yeah, for sure, Electric Intifada, they're definitely great. So today I wanted to go over like what I think is an important historical thing. No one is insane enough right now. Yeah, the fact that the former prime minister Naftali Bennett had to go on television and beg people not to leave the state of Israel. I think like if your country has, if it's gotten this bad that you have literally the last person that was in charge of the country being like, "Please don't leave," or even like, because our economy is collapsing, right? I think, once 12% of the population has left, if you play Kamala Harris backwards, you get Naftali Bennett. What? I mean, but yeah, like I just think, to me, like that just shows how far gone, the state of Israel is right now. Like it's so bad to the point where they have to beg for like, nobody to leave, right? Do not come. Right? Oh, yeah. Do not leave. Yeah. Yes. I get it now. That used to be an emote, but for some reason it doesn't show up with the better TTV or whatever it is. We oddly enough, the one that shows up in place of it, I'm not even joking, and I only know of this person because of Irene, is Doctor Disrespect. Like it replaced the Kamala Harris "Do Not Come" right with Mr. Disrespect. And I'm just like, why is there this emoji here? Like, I think this is like the worst thing to even have on, but I guess I can't be the arbiter of that. But anyways, why do you say that, Maku? Also, by the way, I want to make sure that we have mods on in both chats, by the way. So if there is a mod that would be willing to be on the Twitch side of things, I would very much appreciate that. Again, just to make sure that everything is going swimmingly. But yeah, I literally nothing of this of this entire stream is really gonna deal with China at all. So I don't know, but thank you for your input. So anyway. But yeah, no, I definitely think that, like that's kind of where we are. Yeah, the whole, I mean, I know I talked about China earlier, but I wouldn't say it was necessarily in a, positive way. But of course, as we know, if like when people start talking about communism, we literally have demons descending on us right now. So of course. So anyway, what I wanted to talk about was Plan D, Plan DALET, right? So I've already explained how the Hebrew alphabet works, right? People know alpha, beta, gamma, delta, right? So that is the Greeks transliterating the Hebrew, right? Or technically the Phoenician, but it's Aleph, right? Which used to mean ox. Now the word shor means ox. Bet, which means house, right? And it used to look like a tent, back in the day. Gimel, right? Which looks like a camel, right? Gimel, right? You see if I wasn't so busy nodding oh no, I just no it. Don't worry about it. I'm just saying, like, if there is a mod that can, I mean, so far it's, Phoenician was Semitic too, right? It was northwestern Semitic, just like Hebrew and Arabic are. Hebrew and Aramaic are. And also Samaritan and like the other languages that existed at the time, or existed in a very long period of time. But remember, we're talking about biblical Hebrew, right? Not modern Hebrew. That was, made up by the guy that for some reason that dude decided to put a fez on once he moved to Palestine. Yeah, Phoenician was Semitic, and so that's and in fact, this is the reason why, like, people say, although it's actually a different route how this happened, right? That Malta has the only Semitic language that is considered a European language, right? Like in the European Union and everything, right? But the British actually, from what I understand, and I'm not, not that it wasn't spoken, but that its promotion was actually done as a way to lessen the influence of Italy, right? Back then, so But Dalet, which means D, it literally D for door. Like that's literally what it means. Dalet means door. Hadalet means the door. in Hebrew. So this was the culmination of plans A, B, G, technically, right? Aleph, Bet, Gimel, right? That were all part of, and if you've ever read, Ilan Pape's, book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, what, how just like with another group in history whose name starts with the sideways Z, so to speak, they also went through a few plans before they got to their final plan, right? So,
Part of the ongoing genocide on the Palestinian people is the intensified propaganda war on Palestinian history. As more and more people begin to learn about Zionist settler colonialism and break with the human rights defending charade of bourgeois hegemony, they inevitably encounter the period where the ethnic cleansing of Palestine began to unfold in full force from 1947 to
hello,
1948,
Damel.
in which the majority of the indigenous population was expelled out of the
Okay, first thing, what I find so weird? The fact that, like in the United States, right? They always think that refugee means tent, right? That, like, oh, why are the Palestinians now living in, like, brick and mortar or whatever housing, right? Like, why don't they just, like, if they were actually, and this shows you a lot about how people are taught to think, right, to equate and equivocate things together, right? Like, yes, at one time, the refugees, the Palestinians, did live in tents, and right now they're living in tents, right? It's not stopping Israel from doing whatever it wants, but the point being that, like, this belief that, oh, well, they have a cell phone, or they have a, which is obviously just, but, like, every time I hear the whole, oh, well, they have an iPhone, so they can't actually be refugees, which is, like, acting as though you don't need, like, the internet to live in a current day, right? Let alone the fact that, like, oh, the Palestinians live in, like, built up. It's like they did that precisely because, again, like, they're not just going to always be living in a tent, right? Like, that's just, like they've been dispossessed enough already. But it's always this weird thing where people think, like, oh, at some point you stop being a refugee if you're Palestinian, and you start to, like, live in, like, housing that is usually substandard anyway, and hello, Omega Star, welcome in, it's so good to see you. That makes you want to use the chud logic and go, why don't you go sell your house, buy an iPhone? I mean, yeah, like I know what you mean, right? Like, if it truly was, like, oh, it's not, and it's the same thing with Israelis, right? It's like they like to say on one hand, oh, like when we were in charge of it, quote unquote, right? It was thriving. No, it wasn't. It was not. That's the reason why people had to leave. Anyway.
homeland. And it is this part in Palestinian history which holds everything together.
Okay, so this right here is the movie. Or documentary, I should say, that I want to watch. The problem is, that there are some descriptions, right, that these former Haganah soldiers, Irgun soldiers, right, that they make, because they literally get to they have confessed to what they've done, right? They like this guy right here laughs, right? When he says the events were horrendous, he's laughing. And when I told our wonderful mod Zira, if she could, cut out some of these parts, it was honestly very difficult because like there's so much in this documentary that is just beyond messed up, right? But it's because of the fact that they feel complete impunity, right? That they have complete impunity because in a way it could because they do, right? They know they will never be held accountable for what they did, right? Because quite literally, and again, Ilan Pape makes this quite clear in his book, right? The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, is that after the Second World War, right, when, we live in an age, after what happened in Hashoah, right, with the Holocaust and everything, that, that was such a worldwide event. The fact that people have been able to successfully, and I say this, obviously in the sense of like quoting from his book, right, but more so that they've been able to downplay the Nakba to the point where it's like not a known thing right across the world, right? Like most people still view it as a kind of one-off thing, they don't see it as an extension of what Europe did in the 30s and 40s and what it did in its colonial holdings, right, previously. So because of that, it's this like, it's the one, genocide, ethnic cleansing that has been able to like escape very in-depth, historiographical study, because again, the denial of it is so pervasive, right? Because from the beginning, right, it's just was covered up so holistically. So,
which turned most of us into anti-Zionists, which is the, quote, key site of Palestinian collective consciousness and the single most important event that connects all Palestinians to a specific point in time. It is for this reason why the particularly filthy ruling class of Germany, which is yet again exhilarated to support another genocide, has...
By the way, this makes it, and I kid you not, Germany's fourth genocide since 1871, when it became a country. 4 genocides. Like the one everyone remembers is obviously the Holocaust, right? But there also was, so we have against the Palestinians. We have against the Nama and the Herero people in German Southwest Africa, as it was called then. We have the Holocaust, et cetera, right? So 4 genocides, and yet this is the country that literally tries to make it seem like, oh, well, the problem is over there, No, honey, you are the problem. Okay? You. But, it's just ridiculous to me. And then Italy too. It's like, oh, if it wouldn't have been for Japan being, this probably, if America would have been more honest with itself, this probably would have been the Pact of Steel. Like when I see this, I'm like, oh yes, you could just, yeah, I could see that this as the fascist axis right here.
Launched a propaganda campaign of denying the planned ethnic cleansing, which came...
Yes, this is true. Let me see if I can resize this a little bit, because I recognize that it's kind of cutting it off a little. Okay. This is in the capital of supposedly the most educated, the most intelligent. I mean, there is literally a book called on the German genius, and it's like talking about how like Germany is like this uniquely. I mean, it's obviously a pop history book, right? But it's literally like how Germany, because of its like history, like uniquely gave rise to this like many generations of geniuses, right? And it's just like, okay, okay, but they have this brochure called Mythos Israel, right? 1948, right? 48, right? Has been distributed in schools in Germany, right? Aimed at downplaying, and this was from the source is from a German local council. But again, that means that it is approved by the state. Like it could, like the local council cannot distribute these things, these leaflets, unless it's government approved. So again, downplaying the forced displacement of the Nakba and deeming criticism of settlements as anti-Semitic, which is something that, again, if you know, like the laws that Germany has put in place, right, for like people, even people just becoming citizens, they have to take an oath, right, that they fully accept the existence of the state of Israel, right? Like, what does one have to do with the other, right? But it's like even in the United States, like in Texas and other states, right? You have to sign a pledge, right, that you essentially will be, essentially just like identify as a Zionist, I suppose, in just one way to put it.
About with the creation of the State of Israel as a myth. The Social Democrats of the SPD and the Conservative...
See, this is why I hate when people try to tell me Shakespeare, the Social Democrats, they're not this this horrible party that blah blah blah. Because I know people who try to be like, pretend to be leftist online. And one of the things that they do is they say that like it was a good thing that the SPD essentially brought an end to the German Revolution of 1919, right? The November Revolution. Which is just, what are you talking about, right? Because they're obviously, they're reformists. But the way how they act as though they somehow were a revolutionary movement as well. No. If you want me to tell you something that's actually never taught about the SPD, right? Because it was given so much power to the point where it was able to have so much control. The reason why it was chosen, and I kid you not, and it's from a history book called The Death of Democracy. The SPD was chosen by the prince, the crown prince of the Second Reich, right? To Kaiser Friedrich Wilhelm II, right? He went to him and said, if you don't put the SPD and make them, right, the chancellor, whatever, we won't be able to keep ourselves on the throne of the German Empire. Right? Do you want, the Deutsches Reich? Do you want that? Then you have to put the SPD in charge. That is why they are reactionary. That is why they were more than willing to side with the Freikorps, right? To tell them where Rosa Luxemburg was at. Because they were not even brought in by popular vote. They were brought in by Der Kaiser. Der Kaiser put them in charge. So don't forget that. And that's why anybody that wants to be like, oh well, Weimar, blah 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 blah. No, I don't want to hear your little Weimar. No, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see your little video where you think that, oh, there's quote unquote the Weimar, whatever, blah blah blah. No, no, no. I'm telling you that you're wrong.
CDU are united once more in their genocide on racism, distributing leaflets in schools titled The Myth of Israel 1948, with which they desperately try to prevent the young from learning the truth. A truth which is not complex.
Oh yeah, here it is. Oh, that's right. This is what I meant. Oh my gosh. I forgot that this is the video that talks about Brianna Wu. Oh my gosh. Literally, Brianna Wu is in here. Like, I'm like, I know, like, I've heard about this woman, right? Brianna Wu. And like all these things about her, right? Which I didn't want to put her name in the title because the last thing I need is for her to like come into the chat and try to be all like, whatever. Like, I really don't care, Brianna. I really couldn't care less. But I just like the fact that Brianna Wu is used as an example of Nakba denial in in essentially a history, sort of what are they called? Video essay. I just found it hilarious because I thought of all the people in the world, right, that I have like no real knowledge on, right? Because I know she's part of something that happened in 2014 or something, right? I've literally read an academic book on the subject, and I'm still just like, I still don't see how everything can, but whatever. Maybe I'm just too, I don't know. But regardless, the fact that this is what you will be remembered for, at least for me anyway, is the fact that she was cited and used as a source for contemporary Nakba denial is just ridiculous to me. Like, wow, Brianna, wow.
Complex or a particular narrative, but a simple truth, easily understood by anyone. In this video, we're gonna expose the most important of these lies, and we're gonna plunge deep into the history of the seminal catastrophe, an inevitable outcome of the Zionist project and ideology, masterminded by a covert group of Israel's most renowned figures, now celebrated as war heroes. The historical disaster.
And yeah, the fact that they did this, the soldiers did not have to do this. I hate people that literally try to say from a leftist perspective, quote unquote anyway, so they claim, that, oh, this was, somehow righteous retaliation. No, it's not. Like, even liberal institutions that are by definition, not exactly on the side of the oppressed, right, of the marginalized peoples of the world, right, of the with the global South, right, that instead tend to find ways to make loopholes for the hegemonic powers to get away with whatever they want, when even they say that that's not true, right? And I'm talking about the UN, describing the Gaza Strip as being, occupied territory, right? It really shows you how that Western, like the very American idea of like occupation means you have to have soldiers on every block, right? It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, we can see how the United States has occupied territory, right, of indigenous people. It doesn't have to have soldiers on every block. It can still, if it's what controls, like, for example, the reservations, if it can control how it can exist, right, those indigenous nations that have been given reservations, right, already there's that. They've been given a reservation by the government, right, and that there is a relationship with the state, right, that puts them completely at the mercy of said state, right? then by definition, that's occupied territory, right? The fact that they decided to put some ribbon and bows around it and say, oh, well, this is, no, it's not independent. It's not nothing. Because by definition, it has to function within certain legal things, right? It doesn't matter if, oh, well, within this territory, these XYZ things can occur. If the water, the electricity, I mean, like, the fact that Yoav Galant could say, En maim, en ochel, en delek, right? No water, no food, no electricity. The fact that he could say those things and could actually have those things be efficacious, that is to say, that him saying that we're going to have none of those things in Gaza shows you that it's an occupied territory. So that's why, like, any discussion that says, oh, well, they're not occupied because they blah, 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 blah. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. I don't know. There are several occupying colonialist forces that don't show the level of savagery and bloodthirst. Right. I mean, and again, that's because of the ideology, as we're going to get to, right, here, right? It's just so beyond.
That never ended, known by Palestinians as the Nakba.
This is something that I have said before on stream as well. This belief that the Zionists at the UN, that they like accepted the partition agreement and all of that blah blah blah, they didn't really agree to it, right? Like, they knew from the get-go that they weren't actually going to, like, they didn't actually agree to it. Because on one hand, they already knew that they were going to try to take more land, because even the UN back then, which was essentially just a whole bunch of colonizers, right? Mostly colonizers from countries that, had only recently become independent anyway, right? Like the Philippines, for example, had only become independent in 1946. So in 1947, it was able to vote. Meant that like the commission, right? And now I'm forgetting, it's like UNISCOP or something like that. Anyway, it doesn't really matter, but it's like they started an official commission for the partition of Palestine, right, by the UN, which, by the way, just the fact that the UN decided to do it, even though like the Palestinians never agreed to have their land cut in half or whatever, right? Like that's the problem, right? Like, people think like, well, because the UN said it could be partitioned, therefore it can be partitioned. No, well, the Palestinians never wanted it to be partitioned in the first place, right? So the fact that then the colonizers, right, the colonizing country, the UK, then gave it over to the UN, right, doesn't change the illegality of the partition in the first place. At least I would contend that, right? I would say that even with the transfer into the fact that the Palestinians were not given the same aid in having their state apparatus, right? Because there was actually a point where the Palestinians were willing to accept a deal to essentially create a government, right? But the only thing would be is that they would have given the Zionists, who made up of like 7% of the population, 50% of the vote. So even all of their compromises were always giving outsized power to the Zionists. So again, they were never satisfied with half. In fact, they were upset at the fact that they asked for 80% and that they only gave them 56%. Because even they were like, that's like No, that's too much, so.
In the 1920s, 20 years before the start of the Nakba, Palestinians made up between 80 to 90% of the population, and still, the Palestinian political leadership had agreed in 1929 to allow the Zionist settlement movement equal representation in future state institutions. After all, the British were the ruling power.
Exactly.
And by now it was clear to almost everyone that they clearly stood on the side of Zionism. But shared representation was not what the Zionists wanted, so they rejected the deal. This, along with the rapidly expanding land purchases and evictions by the Jewish National Fund, led to deadly riots. By now it was clear the tensions were about to explode in an unprecedented way. One particular faction split from the Haganah, the Zionist paramilitary organization since the...
Also, can we just say the Haganah symbol looks like they look very fashy, you know what I mean? Which of course, because they were created in 1920, right? People think it's okay, right, to be fashy, right? But the one that they're about to introduce, right, the Irgun, is the one based in the ideology that gave rise to Halikud, which is the party that rules Israel right now, right? Netanyahu's party, and you will see the revisionist Zionist line, and how far I know tonight's stream doesn't really but still, the point being that like what you're talking about, FL, like that level of wanton destruction, right, was far higher in terms of every operation that it did, right, in terms of the operations it with Irgun and Halechi. Now, people will say, oh, well, there were so few people that were... That doesn't matter. I mean, one, the population was less anyway, so proportionately it's, bigger. But also, it doesn't matter. The fact that at the end of the day, they merged all three of them into one and made it into the IDF, right? It doesn't matter. I mean, we don't know if they would have stayed three separate militias over a long period of time, which one would have become the larger one, right? It's only a fact. It's only the matter of, when the state of Israel came into being, right? That, now it exists in this way.
Their methods of quote-unquote defense during the riots weren't fascist.
And also, if anybody here is Australian, you will recognize these uniforms, right? This literally is how Australian soldiers, right, and the Australian, this is how they dress. So it goes to show you how it all, it's all British colonial, right? There was a point after 1929, and then after in 1936, and really think about this. Remember, we're talking about. I'm gonna be talking about India. Okay. There were more British troops in Palestine, historical Palestine, so not Transjordan, just Palestine, than there were in the entire colony of India. That's including Jammu and Kashmir. That's including Pakistan. That's including Bangladesh, right? All of the whole subcontinent. There were more British troops in Palestine than in the subcontinent. You know what I mean? This whole thing right here had less troops than this tiny little sliver of land here. I mean, it's just unbelievable but it was the case after 1936. Why? Because of the Arab Revolt. That is literally how. This is why when people talk about the history of Palestine and all of this stuff, and again, I'm gonna go in depth in my articles, But the reason why I feel that like the so many people don't know just how involved the colonial forces of Britain and other countries were in the Zionist project is precisely because if you were to think about these things, right, like the proportions of what that entailed, like the like just thinking about the scale of an entire subcontinent, right, from the Hydaspes and the Indus River all the way over to the Brahmaputra River, right, like all the way up to the border with Myanmar, right, had less British soldiers in it than, oh, thank you so much, Tilden Wings, for lurking. I appreciate it. Than Palestine, right? This tiny strip of land, right, that had, you know, what was it, like 800,000 something? It was like, oh no, it was like a 1.2 million Palestinians and like 600,000. I know, right? Exactly, Baker. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to just like repeat it, but it's still one of those things that like in my own research, right? Which again, if you'd like to help my research, you can always, go on Throne and contribute. Which, by the way, thank you so much, Omega Star, for helping bring the funding for the book across the finish line. I appreciate it. I can't wait to get the book and start reading it and everything. But the reason why it's been one of those things that I kind of really stress, and I think bears repetition, is because it shows you just how much the Palestinians had no power, right? The Zionist narrative loves to make it seem like the Palestinians were more powerful, right, than the Zionists, and that the Arab armies had had a real chance at defeating the fledgling state of Israel. But we know that that's not the case.
That new paramilitary was named Irgun.
And again, Irgun, right? It showed this little thing that looks like a little key. I mean, I guess you could say it looks like something else, but it shows both sides of what was called Cisjordan or Palestine and Transjordan, right? So, a revisionist Zionism, right? Ha'irgun, Hatzavai, Haleumi Be'eretz Israel, right? Which is its name, right? If you want me to read it out, or Atzal, essentially, it believed that both sides of the Jordan River should be part of Palestine, right? Or in this case, the state of Israel, right? And if you have seen Smotrich, Bezalel Smotrich, right? Every time that, and also Netanyahu, I think he's also been shown with a similar map, but I know Smotrich is probably more infamously known that he went to a conference where it had without the hand and the gun, of course, but it showed both of them as being part of the state of Israel. I don't even know what to say about that. That's just, to me, just ridiculous.
People from the more right-wing current, referred to as revisionist Zionism. To get an idea of what these people thought, one can check articles by prominent.
By the way, this newspaper is called Ha'am, right? Ha'am. And Ha'am literally means the nation, right? But the way how it's used by Zionists is more in the like late 19th century, 20th century, like the nation, kind of way, right? As opposed to like just a group of people, right? So when it's saying Ha'am, like Am Israel, right? It's thinking of it in like racialist terms as well. So
Revisionist Zionist newspaper in the 30s, which explained that the Nazi movement, quote, has both a shell and a kernel. The anti-Semitic shell is to be discarded, but not the anti-Marxist kernel.
So again, this is the thing with Zionism, is that 1933, okay, they're literally saying, hey, you know these people that have been saying what they want to do to people like that have people like us, right? We can get over that, right? But what's at the core of their ideology, that is what we share as Zionists. As Hannah Arendt said in her book Eichmann in Jerusalem, the reason why Hitler liked to work with Zionists was because they, and I'm quoting now, quote, they too thought in national terms, end quote. That is why I stress the whole ha'am aspect of the newspaper, right? So, like when they're saying ha'am, they're saying it as like de volk, right? Like völkisch, right? They're just saying it in Hebrew. So,
When Hitler was rising to power in 1933, it celebrated the Führer among the shining names like...
Okay? Like, this is the reason why it does not surprise me that Benjamin Netanyahu is a Holocaust revisionist, right? This is why. Because the people that founded, that like upheld the ideological forebears, said that this person right here, not, well, Ataturk as well, but who did the Armenian genocide, by the way, and this guy, right, were shining names. Like, this is the reason why, like, people sometimes, sometimes I always wonder if when I used to say very overtly, right, like, I don't want any Zionists to come into my house, right? And that's because it's an ideological thing, right? Like, it's not like, but it's just because, like, I would not want to have Yishai Fleischer, right, who is like a settler in Hebron and is totally okay with the massacre at the Ibrahimi Mosque of Baruch Goldman, right? And we know this because when he had his debate with Destiny, that's what he had as their background, right? The Cave of the Patriarchs, as it's also known. And the fact that even Norman calls him a war criminal. But anyway, that's a whole different story. Like, I just wouldn't feel comfortable having someone that's like, yeah, I'm a settler colonist and blah, 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 right? It just, I don't know. It's just, there's just something about that just doesn't sit right with me. I don't know. But especially if they're in big Netanyahu, revisionist Zionist types, I think about this history, right? That they literally said that, Mustache Man is a shining name. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. He's not shining for me. I don't know.
Kemal Atatürk and Benito Mussolini quote, Hitler has still not caused as much evil as Stalin has.
Again, here we go, right? Let me transition over, right? When they say this, right? They say this in Chazit Ha'am, right? Chazit Ha'am is what I was telling you, right? Where it's talking about the nation, right? Ha'am, right? But it's essentially like völkische Beobachter, right? And that's in essence what it's saying. It's just in Hebrew instead of German, like.
If you look at the Irgun emblem, you notice something interesting. Its map shows both Palestine and what was then called Transjordan. The Palestine Mandate first included Transjordan. It later changed to exclude it, which the fascists wanted to revise, as they saw this area as part of the future Jewish state, hence the designation revisionist Zionism. Some years later, another faction would split from the Irgun, Lehi, better known as the Stern Gang. It would more than once seek an alliance with Nazi Germany, aiming to create the Jewish...
Like, do you see what I mean here? Like this collaboration is at a level that it's just too much. You know what I mean? For people to be For people to say, oh, it's just some accident of history, blah blah blah. It's like this was, in the 30s, right? Like this was already when you already had, all of the the rounding up of people who, again, weren't necessarily Jewish people, were not necessarily the first people that were, when Dhaka opened in 33, but it was communists, and particularly, actually, I should say, those who are differently abled and disabled, right? They were among the first victims of the Third Reich, for eugenical reasons, right? So, again, that's why you get things like the idea of the new Jew and all of that, right? That really come to bear on Zionism from this point onward. So,
state based on, quote, nationalist and totalitarian principles and linked to the German Reich by an alliance. Soon after the start of the current.
So, you see, like, you see what I mean? Hello, fine folks. I'm dropping in to have stuff. I can't really listen and participate depending on how stuff goes. That will change sooner or later. Okay, you're alright. No worries. Welcome in. But this is what I mean, right? That, like, this stuff is not only just not taught, right, when it comes to the history of the founding of the State of Israel, but if you do, even if you do, like, read about it or whatever, right, it just, in my mind, I mean, maybe for me, right, hello, powerful finger, welcome in, it just makes me just be very, I don't know, very suspicious of people who overtly try to, like, excuse it, right? Hi, BCAT K.
Genocide. Israeli and some Western media outlets fawned over an ex-Lehi sweet fascist grandpa joining the slaughter. However, it wasn't just the right wing. The undisputed leader of the Zionist movement, the quote-unquote socialist David Ben-Gurion, saw Transjordan.
And again, this is why anytime someone tries to sell you that, oh, Zionism was socialist or what, it's not. It never was. And again, this is proven evident with, like, I know that Philippe was asking me earlier about, like, revisionism. Well, here you have people that proudly call themselves revisionists, right? National Socialists. Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, hence why just before you came in, it was talking about how the Stern Gang, the Lehi, right, one of the three paramilitary groups of the pre-state Zionist movement, right, actively sought to make an alliance with the Third Reich. So, and in fact, I think this was in the revisionist newspaper Ha'am, Hazit Ha'am, which literally, I mean, one could literally translate it almost to, like, Völkische Beobachter, right? Like, you almost could, but I mean, but that's what, when they say Ha'am, they don't mean it as in, like, a nation of people. They mean it in, like, the folk type of way, right? They used to be Strasserites during the left era. Now, yeah, well, yeah, where they're like, where they literally say that, Mustache Man has not done anything bad, as bad as Stalin ever has, and this is like 33. So, So, like, this is where we begin to see how revisionism does work, in that you begin to see people who, due to whatever reason, right, their claim to socialism changes, right? It stops being about, internationalism, liberation, etc., and it instead becomes something, resembling something reactionary.
as part of the future Jewish state as well. Not just that, the most important Zionist in history envisioned the Jewish state extending into Lebanon, Syria, and even considerably Sinai. Even the supposedly communist Shomer HaTzair, the kibbutz movement which regarded itself as to the left of the future founder of Israel, asserted the right of Jews to settle there. From the beginning, the difference between left-wing and right-wing Zionism was the speed and subtlety of settler colonialism, whereas the Netanyahus want to come quickly. Left and liberal Zionists tend to emphasize international opinion more in their more subtle conquest, as will be shown in this video. In part 2 of this series, we introduced Ben Gurion and the various so-called socialist Zionist parties he led, which had founded the Haganah, the main command and fighting force of the Zionists. The Haganah.
Remember, the Haganah is responsible for, again, this documentary. I really want to talk about it because it's talking about a historian who had his life ruined. Had his life ruined by the former Haganah soldiers. Essentially had his master's thesis thrown out of even the library, which I've literally never heard of ever happening before. Like that just does not happen. Who did address the methodological and he even got like a really high grade on his master's thesis, right? Where he showed how the Haganah had committed a massacre to a town that was completely defenseless, right? That they did not want to fight. But Ben Gurion, and one thing that's important to keep in mind is that Ben Gurion still said that all of the land from Haifa all the way down to Tel Aviv has to be ethnically cleansed, right? So, but this one massacre in particular is very haunting because there is in fact there actually is still a building standing from prior to the ethnic cleansing, but it was so hidden, right? Like the attempts to get rid of all of the survivors and everything was so systematic that not even Walid Khalidi, right, who is one of like his books, he's a historian, and his books on giving the Palestinian perspective literally changed the way how we think about, right? Even he doesn't cite it because literally there was almost no evidence whatsoever for, like, no documentary evidence, right? And again, that's because, like, okay, I will tell you how messed up it got. I'm trying not. It got so messed up to where after they did what they did, I'm not even joking. Like, this is just how sick it all is, and it just, like, reading through the reports and reading through the stuff we have now of what happened, is that after they did what they did with all the people in the village, they went swimming and sunbathing. There's just something about that that's just like, I don't know. I've never felt like I don't know. I don't know what to say. But like, you just finished doing ethnic cleansing. You know what I mean? You're gonna go to the beach? Like. But again, it just shows how little they valued the lives of the people. That I know. And like, look, I understand. Like, I see that the people might be leaving. Look, I know this is a hard topic. I know. I understand that. Trust me. But like, I kid you not. Like, sometimes it's one of those things where, like, if you don't discuss these things, they literally will never be discussed, right? And it's sad to say that, because people who spout the Zionist narrative get all of the attention in the world, right? And the people that say anything that questions that, even a slightly, either just get, whatever. But hot hoot. But yeah, no, like when I read that they went swimming, and this is the thing, I've heard someone who was there, a soldier of the Haganah, and he literally described it as, and afterwards we went to go have some fun. Like, what is in the, you know what I mean? I'm just like, I have never felt so, like that very liberal, like, oh, all you need to do is hear someone else's story to I'm like, I'm hearing the story, and if anything, I feel more alienated from this person than ever before. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. That's...
The Iran and the Stern Gang, while differing in tactics, would be united into one military arm during the Nakba, together forming the Israeli Defense Forces.
So you see what I mean? Why, like, even the usage of different imagery, right? They bring it together, right? And it's just, oof.
1930, the Palestinian political parties were institutionalized under the Arab Higher Committee, short AHC. In the following years, the AHC sought a compromise with the British, who didn't really care about its demands. Palestinian national politics have been under semi-feudal control, which differed from the other Arab national movements. Whereas other Arab ruling classes wanted for the most part to enter into collaboration with imperialist powers, the Palestinian ones were less inclined to do so due to the presence of the Zionist movement, which was favored by the colonial British and thus threatened the position of the Palestinian landlord.
Oh, no worries, Looney Tunes. It's okay.
Still, Britain had funded and installed dependable Palestinian leaders which could pacify them.
Don't worry. Like, obviously, go where you're most needed, because, don't feel compelled to,
With the increasingly frustrated toiling population and could reliably serve British interests. The position of the Mufti of Jerusalem was artificially elevated by the Mandate leadership to be more powerful.
This is why every single time when even those supposed quote-unquote leftists that want to talk about, that the Mufti of Jerusalem and blah, 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 blah. And also, by the way, like, there is this supposedly educational Jewish channel, right, that used to just literally just do like Torah, like, study stuff, right? And I kid you not, like, ever since like October 8th, they've just been pumping out the like Zionist, like every pretense, excuse me, that this organization was like ambivalent about Zionism, just right out the door. And one of the things that they brought up was this, right? They like, oh, look, he even went to Germany and saw, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, one, it was a hereditary position already. Two, it had never had any real power, right? It was given more power. In the same way that with Hinduism in India, right? Certain, like the Hinduism that exists today reflects the way in which the British wanted Hinduism to work, right? Because they wanted it to function in such a way, right, so that way that the Brahmanic ruling class, right, would have that power, right, would have the power, so that way they could be the collaborators, because they were willing to collaborate, right? And so, again, it's very different, obviously, in Palestine, but again, it still is informed by the fact that how indigenous, like whether you're talking about India or whether you're talking about Palestine or whether you're talking about colonial Mexico, the structures that are built by way of the colonizers, right, and how people fit in those structures is a result of the colonizers, not You know what I mean? Like, okay, good to know. Good to know.
A certain Hajj Amin from the elite Husseini family was put in place by the British against other competitors to keep Palestinians at bay, especially those among the Palestinian working class of the peasantry, who became more and more destitute due to the Zionist conquest of land and labor. By 1935, the Zionists controlled the vast majority of industrial companies in which Jewish workers outnumbered Arab workers.
So this was actually something that was done where I actually saw a sign um at a recent didn't the different paramilitary, yes they did, yeah, like even they even have parades and stuff in honor of, so yes, yes, you're completely correct, Nero Riot. Yes, because remember, like Jabotinsky still given a, I mean, like all of like Likud's founding ideology is revisionist Zionism, right? Like that's the reason why, and like the religious Zionist settler project, right? Also, comes out of revisionist Zionism, because like that's the reason why Bezalel Smotrich, right, when that leak supposedly happened, right, just a few days ago. I know I report the news quite often, breaking news, right? Like of him literally saying like, "Oh, Netanyahu's on our side," right, and that he wants to annex the whole West Bank, right, and give us total control, right? It's like as if they didn't already have total control anyway, right? But to just remove the pretense of area A, B, and C, right? Is part of that, right? Because there are some people, again, like leftist, liberal, or whatever, again, there is no left in Israel, right? Like there might be people that, and if there are people that are on the left that happen to have been born in Israel, they usually leave Israel. I'll just put it like that. And so, like Elon Pape, Avi Schleim, etc. It's like I could go on. Like almost all of the most important historians that happen to, that are Jewish, for example, and that actually teach the Palestinian narrative or teach research, the what really happened, etc. Right, in 48, 47, etc., etc. None of them live in the state of Israel, because it's like, I mean, to the point where like Elon Pape, I remember once he was saying that he got expelled from the university that he worked at, Haifa University, and he's not allowed to go anywhere near a high school. Like he cannot teach, So he's technically not allowed to go near high schools, right? Because that's when they teach, like national history, right? And he's not allowed to teach at any university in the state of Israel because he's a citizen by birth, right? He's allowed in the country, right? But like Norman Finkelstein isn't let into the country, etc. So yeah, for sure. Like again, all of the famous Zionist leaders, even Herzl, right? Like their Arlington National Cemetery in Israel, which is in West Jerusalem, they went and got Theodore Herzl's body and brought it over to Jerusalem, and they made this huge, like, it kind of makes me think of Franco, the Valley of the Fallen, which has the largest cross or whatever in the world. It has that vibe to it, right? It's very fash vibes, right? So yes, and like every prime minister is like right next to one another, blah blah blah. It's all just. And another thing too, I also want this. It's with the parades and everything. It's interesting too that we know that the IDF is desecrating all of the cemeteries in Gaza, right? In Gaza, except for the ones that are of the British, which means the European ones, the white ones, don't get messed with. Only the Palestinian Arab ones do. That's how messed up that is, right? Like, literally, they showed a picture of this, like, bombed out buildings, everything, blah blah blah, everything, and then there's this like green lawn, light colored. Yeah, I think it was TRT News, which is they do English news, but they're based in Turkey. They showed that literally, like, you can see this, and it's like this weird, like, destruction everywhere, and then here's this like little garden, sort of, so to speak, right? And then you find out that it's the British cemetery, and that the only one that they haven't desecrated, or the only ones they haven't desecrated in all of Gaza, are all the white people cemeteries. They're the ones that get to stay in the ground, I guess. So.
By more than 3 times.
Which, by the way, under Jewish law, I know it doesn't matter. I know that they don't care about Jewish law, but even if they cared, right? Let's assume that they did. A Kohen, which is the most common surname in Israel, by the way, a Kohen cannot be anywhere near a dead body. So if they cared, but they don't. This is why this whole Judaism, Zion, they don't care, because if they did, everybody that was a Kohen would be nowhere near any dead body. That means they would not be part of the war effort, quote unquote.
Earning on average 145% more than the Palestinians. The British-supported Zionist capitalists hampered the emergence of a Palestinian national bourgeoisie, and under the ethno-supremacist slogan of
Oh yes, this is what I was saying, that I saw a sign at one of the protests. I want to say it was in might have been in the West Bank, but now I'm unsure. It might have been just outside of Gaza, but it had Havodah Yehudi, Jewish labor only. The same, literally. This stuff from before the state of Israel was even found. They're still using it today. They're literally saying, we want to discriminate, right? It's the same thing like with the Puritans, right, in England, right? They didn't come to America to flee persecution. They came to America because they wanted to be able to persecute. That's why they came here, right? This whole little fabrication about the whole, the 1620 to 1640 story of why the Puritans came over. Again, it's that they did not like the fact that differences of religion were being tolerated in England, right? As they were in the Netherlands as well, which is why they wanted to leave, right? So that's why they went to Massachusetts and founded themselves a theocracy. They came to America not fleeing persecution, but to induce it. So again, it's just the craziest thing I heard is people saying Zionism is anti-colonialist, comparing it. No. I'm sorry, but you cannot read the Judenstaat, and you cannot read the Neuland. You cannot read any of the founding documents of Zionism, where literally everything is about how it's going to be a colony. This is why Hoot Night Damal, Zionism is multipolarity. Oh my God! Don't even tell that to the infrared people, because they will run with that. Well, actually, no, because they're way too anti-Semitic, but, still. No, I know. I know that you mean that as a joke. That's why I'm saying. Literally, like, Herzl's letter to Cecil Rhodes, right? He's like, I need your help, right? And it is precisely because it is something colonial, right? It's just like, even the fact that they call themselves settlers, right? You know what I mean? Like they call themselves settlers, right? They call themselves pioneers, colonists, right? Like, even in Hebrew, right? Remember to like the stream. Yes, thank you. They also brag and post images of soldiers and more senior militaries holding weapons against holding up Torah scrolls. Yeah. There's also video, but I can't play it because I know Twitch will, not take too kindly of that. But where I literally, in the protests that the Haredim, right, the ultra-Orthodox Jews that were promised by, and this just goes to show why Zionist promises are, what they are. They were promised, right, at the founding of the State of Israel, right, that in order for them to, in order for the ultra-Orthodox to be convinced to support the Zionist project, one of the biggest things was that they had to be allowed certain, they had to be given concessions. One of those was the, what's it called? The exemption from having to serve in the IDF. Now that the court, right, the High Court, the Supreme Court of Israel, has said, oh, well, now actually that's actually that's not the case. The Attorney General that day, right, or that next morning, I believe, actually, when the ruling was published, said we have to draft 3,000 Haredi soldiers. When I kid you not even 2 weeks earlier, I think it was not even a week earlier, there was a huge draft protest, right, being held by Haredi men, in which you saw the IDF attacking the Haredim, right? And there are other videos, right, where they beat up, right? This whole thing that they're defending Jews or Judaism. No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. The fact that they are Jewish, right, the Zionists, is irrelevant. Right? Because that's that only, is by accident of history at this point. But when I saw someone who literally was just holding a sign saying essentially saying, you promised us no draft in Hebrew, right? Which is not even a, F the idea. You know what I mean? It's not even a mean statement, right? It's literally you promised us this thing, right? You promised us this thing. And then I literally see him get I felt like it was within an inch of his life. That's how bad it seemed. And yet they dare to say that they're the ones protecting Jews around the world. Literally, Israel makes the world more dangerous for Jewish people, by far. And that's why every time I hear from the Prime Minister's office all of this stuff of oh, with the rising blah, blah, blah. And it's all your fault. You know that, right? As much as you like to use it as excuses, it's all your fault, right? Because it's just, ridiculous.
Jewish labor only, the labor Zionists who dominated the unions virtually eliminated progressive Arab leaders from the labor movement, which further opened the ground for the Palestinian semi-feudal leadership to gain hold over national politics. It is said that the Mufti Haj Amin ordered the assassination of the main Palestinian labor leader at the time, Sami Taha. The Palestine Communist Party, predominantly Jewish, also bears the responsibility for the weakness of Palestinian working class politics. In 1920, it put out a statement saying, "The Jewish workers are here to live with you. They have not come to persecute you. They are ready to fight."
And that was completely a lie. If there's ever been if there's ever been, a Communist Party lie, that's one of them right there.
Fight on your side against the capitalist enemy, be it Jew, Arab, or British. Remarkably, nowhere did they mention Zionism, even though it was the primary threat for both Palestinians and their own party, which thus remained isolated, reminding us of some left-wing currents today. It was only during
Exactly.
the Seventh Congress in 1930 when it admitted that it had, quote, essentially adopted an erroneous attitude toward the issue of Palestinian nationalism. While the Communist Party changed its slogan, its practice remained largely the same and never underwent Arabization as the
Which again, like people often look at this term Arabization and they have a very negative, like, what does it mean? It literally meant that you should not be trying to carve out a little Berlin, right, or a little whatever, right, in the middle of the Arab world, right? That if you are truly a communist, and if you really truly want to just live in that land, which is not the issue of contention, right? It's the colonization of the land that's the issue that is contended, right? Then you should try to, be part of the people, right? To actually be a Palestinian, right? Like actively, work towards, right, liberation, not creating a little niche for yourself, right? A little, because that is anti-communist by definition. That is anti-socialist. That is even anti-anarchist, right? Like it just does not make sense. So that is why while the term, sometimes people make it seem like, they were going to force them to stop being Jewish. That's not what that meant, right? It had nothing to do with, their religious practice or whatever. Nothing like that. It's that you have to actually live like the people on whose land you happen to live on, right? It's particularly because of the relationship that the Zionists have with them, right? Like you cannot resist, right? You cannot say that you are the resistance when you actively take part in, right, the oppression and marginalization of the Palestinian people, which is living in, a Zionist state, right? So that's what is meant.
recommended by the Communist International and its own sloganeering. Those who suffered the most were among the Palestinian majority working in agriculture, high taxes imposed by the British, and the capitalist development, dominated by the Zionist bourgeoisie. Allied with the fascist labor movement also were the Palestinian peasants and farm workers, who faced escalating evictions by Zionist land buyers, as discussed in the last part. The Zionist invasion ruined their way of life, in which honor and dignity through connection to the land was essential. Hence, they constituted the poorest and most politically conscious section of the population, the most willing to wage war against their oppressor, ignited through the leadership of a man whose name was to be eternalized in the memories of Palestinian resistance. The Great Revolt, known to Palestinians as Al-Thawra al-Kubra, often referred to as the First Intifada, was the first time the Palestinian people rose up as a mass national movement. The Kufi
And yeah, I was about to say that is where the kufiya first became a symbol for Palestinian nationalism, particularly the one that was used by, right, the dispossessed peasantry. And another thing too is, like, in terms of like national consciousness, right, really is one of the major starting points for, what we can say, well, one, where Palestinians, right, really begin to have sort of a national identity, right, where they are finally able to recognize in themselves, right, sort of having this connection that goes back, hundreds of years, right? That isn't one that is so. And what I mean by that is it's a form of nationalism, but it's not a form of nationalism that is like the European kind, right? The romanticist nationalism, right, where it invents history, right? Because so much of it is built on the fact that because it's constructed in relation to colonization, a lot of it is like a rediscovery of the past as well. But one thing, I don't know if people noticed, but in the flag of the Arab Revolt, did people see that it didn't just have a crescent, right? Right, the symbol for Islam, but it also had a cross as well. Because before the foundation of the state of Israel, Palestine was much, much more Christian, and has only become less and less and less Christian, because of, yeah, Christian Arabs, exactly, because of Israel, particularly, because they're a minority within an oppressed, marginalized group, right? They tend to often suffer even more so from the Israeli affronts to the Palestinian people. But also, there actually was this, it was quite horrifying. I think it was must have been for Easter or something. It was recent. I think it was talked about on Democracy Now! But literally where a priest is like saying, telling like Christians in America, like, you are literally helping the Zionists make us extinct. You know that, right? Like, Christians in the quote unquote Holy Land, right, are disappearing because of your support for, so.
Yeah, emerged here for the first time as a symbol of the Palestinian resistance. Without understanding this uprising, one cannot fully explain the Nakba. Ghassan Kanafani would write that the Palestinian defeat during the Nakba, quote,
By the way, like, to have all these, like, Che Guevara, all this stuff, like, people always are always like, oh, it's so cringe to have all these, like, this looks cool to me, personally, I just gotta say. Hello, Kyle the Communist. Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Anita. I appreciate that. Welcome in, welcome in.
was amazingly short because it was only the conclusion of a long and bloody chapter which had lasted from April 36 to September 39.
Right, so this is why I'm saying, like, for my historical articles, right, the reason why I have to do them in a series, or the reason why I think it's best to do them in a series, is because, like, when the parts that I have so far, and some of it's, unedited, so, is like, it's 14 pages long, where it's like, oh, it's like, or like, I think I have like 5,000 words, right, but I don't want people to just, you know what I mean, like, I understand that to go that in depth, right, would actually be better if I were to introduce you with the context, right, 1912 to 1917, right, to show you all, the context of, like, how Britain, was even able to get, right, the mandate for Palestine in the first place, right, the means by which it did that, which is what the first article on my Substack goes into, up to the Balfour Declaration, and then go into 1920 when it actually comes into existence, right? So
It's generally believed that the uprising led by the exiled Syrian preacher Izz-al-Din al-Qassam in late 35 sparked off the Greek revolt, finally materializing in frustration by the most exploited Palestinian sectors with the vacillating Palestinian elite, who bet on negotiations with the British while delaying direct confrontation. After al-Qassam was killed by Zionist forces, his funeral was attended by thousands of poor peasants and workers. Al-Qassam had died, but the Intifada was born.
and it's interesting too, because, like, I've heard, I don't know if people know about Elon Levy. People might know that I hate him, but I don't know if they know of him. He's just, he got fired essentially from being the prime minister's spokesman, which is just very, which, I mean, it is funny in its own way, but it's just, I don't know, it's just,
We literally have demons descending on us right now.
that's definitely how I feel whenever I see him. But can't wait to move out of this. Oh well, I'm so glad you were able to find it. Like, I was like, oh, good, yeah, no, it's, he's this, like, guy that's like, anyway, he was a spokesman for, like, for the prime minister's office. Then he got, like, fired essentially, right? And now sounds like you had a crush on, no, no Ew. No, definitely not. I was just remembering his weird thing on Twitter where he said like, what is the secret for your like what is your secret for being such a good spokesperson or whatever, like how are you so good at your job? And he literally put a picture of like tweezers, because he does his brows, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, Elon, just stop it now. Doesn't he do the same similar job? He does get paid, but now he has a podcast, right? Which, by the way, trying to freelance being a Hezbollahist spokesman. Well, now he works for the Citizens Council, whatever it's called. So like they still get state funding from the state of Israel, and he has his own podcast. So he's another middle-aged white guy with a podcast. By the way, you might have noticed that there is now another book on here. It's called Bottoms Up, and it's about Mexican queerness. So yeah, I'll just leave that there. If you'd like to support, I'd appreciate it.
Was insured when the military wing of Hamas was named Izzad-Din al-Qassam Brigades. The AHC leaders realized that if they didn't follow the tsunami of resistance, it would engulf them. The Mufti would later claim that he had been personal friends with al-Qassam all along, but the Palestinian masses continued to outpace the national leadership, which did not represent them, as 90% of revolutionaries were poor peasant volunteers. The new Mufti, due to his later visits and talks with Nazi Germany, serves to this day as a proof for Zionists that Palestinian national ideology is in truth Nazism. Netanyahu even went to Holocaust revision.
Yes, this is true. This is true. I have someone. Okay, so he got a job. He just went with doing. Yeah, yes, like every single day. So there's this like YouTube channel called Ajax. It's Australian, okay? That's all I gotta say. I don't know why they decided to call it Ajax, but and every day they post like the prime minister's spokesman, who's just is also just really but yeah, Elon Levy, it comes up a lot. And it's weird too, because they're like, you can leave your questions in our live chat, and I'm like, really, like, you really think people are gonna ask real questions, because they say, oh, we have an open forum where you could leave your question. The questions they get are literally like, the fact that the prime minister's spokesman knows Joel, whatever his name is, from Breitbart News. He's like, oh yes, we're friends. Like, okay, if your friend is literally the like report is like the reporter, the correspondent from Breitbart News, I think there's a problem. I think there's a bit of a problem. But yeah, and he does have, it's a state of the nation or something like that. Yiannopoulos was also Breitbart. Yes, for a time I believe so. Yes, I have someone who regularly sends me Milo Yiannopoulos tweets, and sometimes I don't even know what to even think about Milo or about the person that sends you the tweets. Like,
by blaming him for the European fascist genocide on the Jewish people. Thousands of Palestinians had volunteered and died in the fight against Nazi Germany.
yes, which is, again, like, this is something that is also never brought up. Palestinians fought in the European theater of war, even in Germany, right, on the British side, right, and even in some cases helped liberate concentration camps, right, which of course most of the concentration camps were liberated by the Soviets, but that's besides the point, right? The fact that you still had people that were, fighting in German-controlled territory, right, and liberating Jewish people from concentration camps, and yet you have Netanyahu legit being like, actually, the real, is just, I don't know. Yeah, I am not clicking that link.
While the Jewish agency struck a deal with the Nazis
Yeah. By the way, I know you don't. Oh, look, it has some Spanish. Um, I know you that went by really quickly, but it just goes by really quickly. They invited Adolf Eichmann at the time to visit Palestine, and he did. Right? So like Adolf Eichmann was not actually like unknown. Like it's not like he didn't know about Palestine. He had been there before by the time he was brought back in 61 to, be put on trial, right? The only difference was that he was, taken to the Beit HaMishpat in Jerusalem, right? But like he literally he and his hiking buddy, I guess, his hiking bro, got stopped by the British police. Who knows what on earth they were doing anyway? Because we all know that the Germans like to hike nude anyway, and all of that stuff. Anyway, so they were hiking Mount Carmel, which is where Haifa is, and that's where the British border police caught them, and then deported him to Egypt, which is yeah. So it's not like he, I don't blame you. I mean,
In return for providing inside information about Jewish plots against prominent Nazis, the SS would help to push German Jews to Palestine and to nowhere.
oh, look at that. The SS, der Schutzstaffel, pushed Jews to move to Palestine. And again, Klaus Polkin's article on this, or I actually think this is a book chapter, it's worth reading, I would say. But like I'm telling you, like when you see the connections that were going on up until, I'm not even joking, up until 1945, like honestly, like had there been some agreement, like earlier, right, like some sort of peace treaty signed earlier on in the war, I don't think that they would have stopped, so, but yes, they wanted to increase the inflow of German Jewish immigrants, which, by the way, Germany only had 500,000 Jewish people living in its borders, right? The vast majority of Jewish people lived either in Poland or what was then the Soviet Union. That's where millions of Jews lived, right? Only 500,000 lived in Germany, right? And now apparently 600,000 have left the state of Israel, and so much so to where, as I said earlier, Naftali Bennett is like literally, please don't leave. Our economy is collapsing.
Where else? The representative would thank Eichmann for supplying the Haganah with guns and ammunitions, which were used against the Palestinians during the Great Revolt.
So see, like there you go. This is why the accusation of like the Mufti of Jerusalem or whatever is like, no, like the special night squads in the late 1930s, again, we're talking about 38, 39, right? This is after Jews have already lost their state. They're now stateless people, right? And so they're like, oh, well, hey, can you kick them out and have them be sent all to us? And in fact, there was a ship, I forget what it's called, what the name of the ship is, but it had docked in Haifa, I believe. And because the Jewish people on that ship did not want to get off and essentially stay in Palestine, they were like, no, we want to go to France, we want to go to America, right? Where there's actually somewhere worthwhile to go. Not this ethno state over here. They literally shot at the ship, and 200 Jewish people died. So, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't trust the Zionists with, quote unquote, protecting Jewish people. But yes, British soldiers recruited from the Zionist militias when they did their dirty war, which again, I hate that term. Like, like to use that like in the Mexican context is also bad, because this is why people think that, oh well, because the person in charge of Mexico, like the face, changed every 6 years, it wasn't a dictatorship. No, it was a fucking dictatorship.
The Americans and Zionists favored the immediate entry of 2.5 million Jews that fled persecution into Palestine, as neither the US nor the UK were willing to take them in.
And again, that's why Balfour's Declaration, right, was signed, because they did not want Jews from Eastern Europe to go to Britain. That is why the 1924 Immigration Act, right, was signed. Right? That is why those things were done. Because they did not want Eastern European Jews, which again, the vast majority of the people killed during the Holocaust, right, were people from Poland, people from Hungary, people from the Soviet Union, right? So, yeah.
85% of them found refuge in the Soviet Union, although around 100.
So again, the vast majority of all of the Jewish refugees that did occur, right? And this is in the book Le Sionisme contre Israël. Literally, the country that received the most Jewish refugees is the USSR. It received, again, over a bit over 3/4, as you can see here, right? Is that ever mentioned, though? Is the USSR ever thanked for? No, but the 8.5% that later created an ethno-state, which, by the way, like, the Zionists outlawed Yiddish. So after the Second World War, these people who had just been through these immense horrors, right, now arrived in Palestine, only to then be told, you can't even speak in your own language anymore. It's illegal. And were then put into camps as well. So it's just like, like this whole thing of like, oh, that they were so, that they care about it. They actually don't. It's actually recorded. Norman Finkelstein's book goes into this. But Germany never paid the survivors, the 195,000 or so Holocaust survivors, right, their monies directly. Instead, it gave it, because the state of Israel said, we represent, it paid them, right? It paid the state of Israel. The state of Israel never gave any of that money out. Like, very few people have ever gotten any money at all. And if they did, like Norman Finkelstein's mom, it was a tiny sum of what they should have received. Like, I think his mother in total received $3,500. $3,500. That's all she ever got. After everything that Nazi Germany did to her, I should say. That's all she got as restitution for the crime. Her entire family was gone. Like, literally. Norman, like, I have a lot of sympathy for Norman, and I can see why, he gets, trust me, when it comes to his, his ideas about, queer issues, I don't care. I never listen to him. I have no, I would tell him to go fart in a phone booth, for all I care, right? But, like, both of his parents literally had their entire families just gone. They're like, and he's not, he doesn't have any kids. You know what I mean? Like, it's this very, anyway, I'm not here trying to defend Norman, but I'm rather trying to use Norman as an example of the fact that, like, his mother only got $3,500. And also, when the state of Israel, as well as these Jewish organizations, really Zionist organizations, but when they extorted the Confederation of Switzerland into paying out a sum of money that was billions of dollars, right? None of that reached Holocaust survivors. That is why, I kid you not, I have and if you ever donate to Jewish charities at all, you will at some point receive this thing. Oh, there are Holocaust survivors in Israel that are have food insecurity. What are you talking about, right? Like, all of the billions of dollars that were given from West Germany and then United Germany to the state of Israel, you would think would have alleviated any of that. But no, because it all went into the coffers of the Zionists instead. So, my boss called working on 524 cars in an 8-hour period, causing me to have no time for other tasks due to the last minute notice excuses. I wouldn't say, oh, wow. I mean, I definitely feel your frustration. That feels like another insult to me, the pittance she received. Oh, yeah, no, exactly. That's the reason why, like, when he gets upset at people who, like the people he's had to debate, right? And they want to say whatever about the Holocaust. I'm like, what on earth are you talking about? Like, literally, this is a person who they only got one payment, $3,500, and that was it. That was it. And yet you have something like the Jewish National Fund that, like, oh, it does that thing. Like, do people remember this? They used to do this back in the day, but I don't know if they still do it. Remember when you could, like, name a star after someone? Do people remember that? Like, I haven't really seen it since, right? But you used to be able to, like, buy a star, right? You name it after someone and say, hey, I named this star after you. Whatever. That's kind of what they do, but with trees, in a weird way. You donate money to them, and the Jewish National Fund buys land, right? Usually illegally. That is to say, in methods that are coercive, from Palestinians, right? Etc., etc., etc. And then it will plant trees, right? Usually, though, this is actually a big problem. And this is actually just shows you how just stupid it all is that they plant pine trees, right? Pine trees, like from like northern Germany or whatever, like Scandinavia, right? They plant them in, Palestine, right? And that's actually the reason why Hezbollah, every single time that they launch something, everything sets on fucking fire. Hello, Sasha. Welcome in, welcome in. You can buy a plot in heaven now for $100 per square meter. Hey, I mean, that's cheaper than Manhattan. I mean, at some point, you might as well just, But yeah, to me, it is an insult. This person who was in the mathematics department at Warsaw University, right? Who, remember, this was in the 1930s, right? Am I correct that they bought a lot of land in Palestine from non-Palestinians? Yeah, that's true. From the other minorities, other national groups in what is the state of Israel, quote unquote, would be like Arameans, Samaritans, Armenians, and in fact, that's actually, God, I wish I could remember their Twitter right now. But there actually is a problem right now happening in the old city of Jerusalem, where Zionists are buying out properties of the smallest of the four quarters, which is the Armenian quarter, and essentially driving them out of the Armenian quarter. So yes, and they're not Palestinian; they're Armenian. All right, I've heard quite a few talk about this in the fundraising drives, and that it was, yeah, in the blue boxes. Yeah, in the blue boxes. You know, it's funny because I actually used to have an old, like a like the little tin boxes that I used to give out, right? Um because I forget, it was like some charity event and they gave them out, right? Some, and they were meant to look like the old fashioned ones, right? Landlords, not gamers. I'm also thinking like bigger absentee landlords. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes, for sure. Um, hello. Yes, Israeli National Fund would like. I would like 900 eucalyptus trees planted around a settler colony. Yeah, I mean that's literally what they did. They planted all of these like northern German pine trees all over the place, and that's the reason why there are all these forest fires that used to never happen. Because like olive trees, for example, they literally have torn down olive trees that are over 1,000 years old, right? To put some like those like really weird, like those palm trees that are like that were made, right, that are from I mean they're like genetically modified. How should I put it? They're like those pine trees, palm trees that are like really big in Florida and also Southern California, I should say, right? Because they make them look like a big pineapple, right? Like they made it look like that, right, for aesthetic purposes, right? It isn't necessarily naturally like that, right? But then that means that all of its dry leaves fall right down, right? That's the problem. Is then that means that the surface area that is flammable is now essentially the whole tree. Well, if you plant a whole bunch of those in the middle of an area that's very arid, like I don't know, de Boker, which is literally in the middle of the Negev desert, uh, you're gonna get forest fires. you know, Olives are great. Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, well, he complained and said that I stopped working on and did the tasks. He complained about it. What? Ugh, that's messed up. I mean, that's just inhumane. I mean, that's just that's just ridiculous. How can he expect you to do like far more work than you? That's doesn't even. I don't know. But I mean, yeah, that's just. I mean, and Southern California. I mean, that's what Southern California did, right? We took Australian eucalyptus trees and then put them all over Southern California, and then we're like, oh, why are there all these fires happening? And it's literally because we took a tree that's not indigenous to this land and did a manifest destiny with trees, and now the fires manifest destiny, right? They are artificially select, right? Exactly, yeah, they're artificially select. Thank you. They are, which also creates a problem for in more humid places than Palestine. But if they feel like it's worth the upkeep, or they don't realize the upkeep, right? It's the same thing with pine trees, right? Because they're evergreens, right? Because like in their minds, right? I mean, it's the same thing in Southern California, right? People have planted a whole bunch of pine trees, right? And cypress trees. I mean, there are Californian cypress that's that is endemic to California, but it's not the kind that's typically I mean, it's same thing with like Bermuda grass, right? Like people plant it, but it's not endemic to like to the western part of the United States, right, or whatever, right? And so that's why like it when it gets dry, it just burns up like nothing, you know.
Thousands of refugees could enter the US between 1933 and 41. Hundreds of thousands more applied to immigrate, but were denied. The US had introduced strict anti-immigration legislation from 1924. Israeli professor of history Shlomo Sant writes, absent this stern anti-immigration policy, it is doubtful whether the state of Israel could have been established.
And yeah, I agree with Dr. Sand that that if it wasn't for the policies of the United States and Britain in particular, right, the two countries that were that one could have received, right, being large economies, etc., particularly the United States, right, had it not closed, had they not, put the quota system, etc., everything kind of like right now, right? Like right now, the United States, like the people that are acting like, oh, they can't take, like, some crisis beyond what the many crises were already happening is going to happen. And it's literally because of the world border thing, right? The last time that we had something like this, or at least one of the last times, was it created the state of Israel, right? Because that meant that people were compelled then to choose Palestine as opposed to going where they actually wanted to go. And I've talked about this before, right? In Avi Shlaim's book, Collusion Under the Jordan, or Across the Jordan, or something like that, as well as other texts that show, also by Avi Shlaim, show that like the Zionist underground try to dislodge Jewish communities like the one in Baghdad by bombing literally a synagogue. The Zionists did that. And like people say, oh, that's blah, blah, blah. Avi Shlaim interviewed the man that, literally interviewed someone that was part of the team that did it, right? And again, like he is an Arab Jew, right? This is something he talks about, right? Like the whole concept of Mizrahi Jews is a, Zionist concept, ex post facto, right? Up until very recently in history, they saw themselves as Arab Jews. They saw themselves as Iraqis or as whatever, right? Like, because there you literally could not tell the difference. Now, however, you have this invented difference, right? And in some places it was disastrous, like in Morocco, for example. In Morocco, Jewish people have been living in Morocco since even before Arab-speaking peoples, right, moved in, right, and began, so they've been part of that fabric of that society. The Zionists literally, through their education program or their indoctrination program, literally convinced them that they were a separate race from everybody around them, which, I kid you not, is literally not the case. Like, they are related to everybody else, right? But it convinced them so much that then they began to actually believe it, right? And so what ends up happening is that then that starts to make the other Moroccans be like, well, then why are you here, right? And again, these aspects are not really talked about because it shows that it's an ideological thing, right? Like if you begin to tell people, oh, you're different, you're blah, 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 etc., 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 it will, eventually cause, right, that to happen. But another thing that also occurred, and again, this is in Avi Shlaim's book, this is in other Shlomo Sand's, the invention of the Jewish people, the invention of the land of Israel, those books, and also in the book Three Worlds by Avi Shlaim, right, is that they also, was it the same for Beta Jews in in Ethiopia, well, it's kind of different with Beta Israel, because like kind of with like Jewish communities in Central Africa, etc. today, I guess you could find some connection there for sure. Although I think the case of the Yemeni Jews would probably be another example, because they're very interrelated with the Ethiopian Jews, right? Where like to the point where when Yemeni Jews speak Hebrew, they speak a dialect of it that's so different that that some people think it's like, the original, more original, but that doesn't make any sense. That's not how language works. And they also forget the fact that there were other Jewish states, right? The other Jewish kingdoms, and I know people always think about the one, Khazaria, but even in Yemen there was one there, right? Because there was a lot of Jewish people that lived there, and that contributed to Beta Israel and Ethiopia, for example, like the people, right, and the transmission of religious practice, etc. So for that, it was more of the I don't say traditional because that doesn't sound correct. It was already, there already was interethnic strife within Ethiopia and Eritrea, right, with the Tigray and all of that stuff, right? There already was that interethnic strife. So the fact that then they, directed it towards Beta Israel is a bit slightly different. But with the Yemeni Jews, they literally told them, because they saw them as like simpler, right, and more religious, right? I'm not saying that it's not like with the Moroccan Jews. I'm just saying that there were other factors that play into this, and that's the fact that even now, right, there's a lot of interethnic conflict in the areas that the Beta Israel had to either evacuate to, right, find refuge in, like in Sudan, right, and in Ethiopia, Eritrea, etc. So with Yemeni Jews, they literally told them, like, okay, the Messiah's come, essentially, right? Like literally, like the state of Israel's been founded, and it's like the best thing ever, right? And they buy it. I mean, they literally get sold an idea, and I kid you not. And this is some of the saddest part of, like, I mean, there's a lot of sad history that comes with, again, if you do, Jewish history, and you do focus on stuff like this time period, right? It's very sad in many ways, but in one way that it's also sad is that what they end up doing, and that is that when Yemeni Jews are brought into Israel, they are forced into camps, right, in the middle of the desert, right? They're like put into camps in the worst conditions. I mean, like, very similar to the, like, not unsimilar to like the refugee camps that we saw at the beginning of this video, right? Essentially the same, right? Dirty, right? Very bad food, very unclean, from Yemeni Jewish mothers, and they would literally make up stories like, oh, well, your baby needs to blah blah blah, whatever, and they would literally steal them and give them to Ashkenazi couples that wanted children. So did we F? Weird. Oh, it's back though? Okay. Okay, good. Okay, yeah. Okay, we're back. We're back. We're back. Good, good, good. Just had to reload. Okay. Okay, we're back. We're back. Okay, so they would steal. It was obviously Mossad, you know. No, anyway, but they would literally steal the babies of the Yemeni Jews. Like that's what they did. And in fact, I mean, again, there are books that talk about this. There are documentaries that I could recommend, but I mean, they're just all horrific. You know what I mean? Like, this is why, again, like, also the reason why I have to write my articles in a series, is because sometimes it's just like there's a lot of shit that goes on, like in a month of Zionist history, right? Just 1 month, right? It's like literally they're like, how can we be the most evil thing ever? And they're just like, but how do we do that? But like, but even more, you know? And it's just like, and so, yeah, so there are many people who had their babies stolen, and later on they found out that they actually were stolen, and it just skipped here. Oh, okay, good. And then they try to reunite, you know, try to meet their actual parents, and it was very sad because, again, like, they were babies, right? They had done nothing, right? Nothing. They had just been born into this world, and but because the Ashkenazim, right, the racial divisions within Judaism, right, the European Jews, because they saw themselves as superior, right, and that they thought they were doing something beneficent by stealing Yemeni Jewish babies, and raising them in a, you know, European Zionist home, right, that they saw it was justified. In fact, in the documentary I'm talking about, they ask one of the nurses, and she's like, oh, but the baby had such a much better life. Otherwise, she would have been living in the, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, what are you talking about? You're the one that told them to come over from Yemen. It's your fault. You know? Like, I don't know. Like, that's why to me it's just irredeemable. It's on so many levels. I mean, it's already irredeemable, but
Ben-Gurion would tell his pseudo-socialist Mapai party that, quote, if I knew that it would be possible to save all the children in Germany by taking them to England, and only half of them to Eretz Israel, then I would choose the second alternative.
okay. Let's just it should be. It says it's fine on my end. It says there's no drop frames. So let's think about what Ben-Gurion just said. He just said, if I could save all Jewish children suffering in the Holocaust by having them go to England, or only half by having them bringing them to Palestine, he would choose the second one. That half could die, so long as his Zionist dream could, you know, live for another day. That's what he just said. This is why I keep pausing, because sometimes I feel like people really don't, you know, like, he says this as part of the supposed, like, socialist, like, Workers' Party, you know, of Israel, right? And says that, like, that's how much of an ethnic cleanser this person is, right? That he's willing to sacrifice half of all Jewish children to the Nazis, so that way he can make his ethno-state. So
Zionists wanted the Jewish refugees to come to Palestine at any cost. This is most dramatically exemplified later in 1940, when the Haganah sunk a ship carrying almost 2,000 refugees because the British redirected them.
exactly. This is the incident, or I think this is one of the incidents I'm talking about. the Patria. Because the British said, we're actually going to send you somewhere else because, and this is 1940, okay? So, like, like, so like the Battle of France has already happened, right? And all of these things, right? Or let me actually skip back just slightly because I want to make sure I get my oops.
The Jewish refugees to come to Palestine had taken
I want to
constant
make sure I get the
risks
dates right.
exemplified later in 1940 when the Haganahs.
Okay, it doesn't say the date. The 25th November. Okay, so this is after the fall of France, right? This is like when Britain is already. This is already when the Battle of Britain is happening, right? This is already when, like, you know what I mean? Like, this isn't like, oh, nothing's going on, right? Like, World War I has already started. Is what I was trying to make sure. Right. It's after September 1939, but it's also after the fall of France. Okay. So, whilst the war is going on, and people also, and again, even though she's a Zionist, right? Even though, Deborah Lipstadt is a Zionist, right? And, whatever. Even her book, Beyond Belief, right? Where she talks about how even in the provincial American press, I'm talking about like the Central Kentucky Bugle, right? It talked about the stuff that Germany was doing in the East, right? Like this whole thing, oh, nobody had no idea. They all knew. Even yokels in the middle of nowhere knew it. Yes, he is 3 years old. In 1940, Biden was 3 years old.
The ship carrying almost 2,000 refugees because the British.
You know what's funny is actually this isn't that far off from his birthday because his birthday is November 20th, which is weird because that's Mexican Revolution Day. So,
Directed us to go to Mauritius. More than 200 Jewish people were killed in that attack.
So again, they got mad that the British were like, we're not going to send you this ship. The ship doesn't. And this is the one thing though. Another thing too was that they did not want to go to Palestine. That was the thing. Literally, Britain would literally was willing to send them anywhere else but its own shores, right? Same thing what happened with the Exodus, right? With the ship, the one that was given the fake Cuban visas and then all that stuff, right? Where the guy literally thought of like crashing the boat into the rocks, which honestly I honestly don't know why they didn't do it. I honestly don't know why. Like the people, I've heard lots of people say, oh, he could have done this. It's just like, why on earth would, knowing that they would have to be sent back and eventually end up returning, being sent to other countries, all of which would be taken over by Nazi Germany within like a year of that, right? It's just, which by the way, also here you can also see the trees that they have. Anyway, but yes, they were willing to sacrifice this because they did not get what they wanted. That's what, like, the fact that the people on the ship and the crew said, no, we don't want to dock here. We we want to go somewhere else. They literally shot the ship. They sank, and again, it killed this amount of people.
In Palestine, when a massive 6-month general strike was declared mid-1936, the AHC issued a statement in October with a demand to end the strike. Amin and other leaders admitted they would end the revolt if the Arab rulers of other countries asked them to do so. And it was one Arab government in particular which would soon reveal itself as a key Zionist collaborator during the Nakba. chief opponents of Palestinian liberation.
And this is still the case. This is still seen as being the case. This is the reason why actually the Jordanian government, right? The Jordanian, the monarchy, the Hashemites, it's actually why to this day, right? They will do symbolic gestures to Palestine, right? Now, like even to this day, right? Because otherwise their monarchy will literally be toppled, right? Because there was Black September, right? Which is when they literally went to war, quote unquote, right? They went to war with the PLO, right? Which was in Jordan at the time. It was in Amman, in the capital, because it's Palestine's right there, and at that time Jordan had absorbed the West Bank as part of its territory, which is something it agreed to do with the Israeli blessing, so to speak. The Arab Legion, the only military force in the region in 1948 that could have actually really done damage against the Zionists, was only gave, I forget, was it 2,000 or 5,000, just a couple thousand troops essentially. And again, they were the most well-trained, most well-armed military force in the region. Had like British generals and everything, right? And even then, right, they had already agreed that Jordan would only attack the parts of Palestine, right, where the UN partition plan had already said that it was going to partition it to an Arab state, right? That was their agreement. Like, oh, well, whatever they say is going to go to you is going to go to you, right? And whatever you win, right? And whatever we get from this side, right, we get to keep. That was before the 15th of May. Okay, so
Palestinian politics has a huge impact on the politics of surrounding Arab states, and likewise, it is the Arab ruling classes which have always had massive influence on the fate of Palestine, particularly during the ethnic cleansing, which was soon to come. The Emirate of Transjordan was ruled by the noble Arab family from 1921. The family traces its descent from the Prophet's daughter Fatima. The Hashemites were kicked out of the Hejaz by the Saud dynasty in 1925, and one son would be installed as king of Syria and then of...
Which, by the way, the Hashemites are actually a cousin branch of the Saud family. Like, they're related, essentially. Just so,
Iraq, while his younger brother, King Abdullah, who was more ambitious and played a central role during the Arab Revolt, would become the Emir of Transjordan, serving as the representative for British imperial interests. A deep faith that the Hashemites were destined to rule the Arab world inspired Abdullah to found a Hashemite empire in his vision for Greater Syria, which would include Palestine as a first step. Abdullah suggested to the colonial secretary at the time, a certain Winston Churchill, that he should be made king of Palestine as well, which was rejected by Churchill, as Britain had already promised the country to Zionism. So, in London, Abdullah immediately entered into negotiations with the Zionists themselves. He offered Zionist organization chief Chaim Weizmann to support the Balfour Declaration if he accepted him as Emir of Palestine. He said the Jews could eventually form a relatively autonomous province within his Hashemite empire. But there were two problems. First, the Palestinians rejected Abdullah as their leader, just like they rejected the Zionists. And second, as we've seen, the Zionists wanted the whole of Palestine for themselves, including Transjordan. But negotiations would continue. Zionist business leaders would meet the Emir, promising him economic development in return for enriching his dynasty. Although stricken with contradictions, the secret meetings between these two players would prove disastrous for the fate of the Palestinian people.
Okay. As I said again,
We literally have demons descending on us right now.
right? But one of the big reasons why that is the case is because this collaboration has been going on for so long, right? Like, the fact that he heard that and was like, okay, then I'm going to go try to cut a deal with the Zionists is very unique in the surrounding states, right? Like essentially, like the fact that it went against the PLO, the fact that it, essentially gave boundaries where it was willing to fight, right? The fact that it even communicated, because the Golda Meir, again, as I mentioned last stream, right, dressed up as an Arab woman, right? So essentially, crossed the border, the Allenby crossing, which is still the crossing, a border crossing to this day, and was trying to convince the emir, the king of Transjordan, to essentially remain neutral. And essentially, and again, this was before they declared the Zionists declared independence. But of course, he had to. He was essentially compelled to, right? And so that's a huge part of the story here, right? It's like, even from the, beginning, it's already just a big.
The British responded to the outbreak of the Great Revolt by appointing a royal commission in 1937 called the Peel Commission to deal with the situation. For the first time, Britain would officially recommend partitioning the country into a Jewish and an Arab state united with Transjordan. Of course, the term partition is a deceptively innocent-sounding euphemism for conquest, as it essentially hands over the people's land to settlers. So the Arab Higher Committee naturally refused, demanding an independent state of Palestine with protection of all legitimate Jewish and other minority rights and safeguarding of reasonable British interests. The Palestinian leadership also rejected Holland's goal to seize the land, part of course. The Zionist leaders generally welcomed the partition, but, and here comes the part that Zionists deny, but which history confirms, that they only welcomed it as an initial, pragmatic step without abandoning the plans for the complete takeover of Palestine. Chaim Weizmann would write, quote, "The kingdom of David was smaller. Under Solomon, it became an empire. Who knows? It's the first step that counts." Ben-Gurion, an extremely tactically adept mind, would say the Peel Plan was, quote, "not the lesser of evils, but a political conquest and historical opportunity. I see in the realization of this plan practically the decisive stage in the beginning of full redemption and the most powerful lever for the gradual conquest of all of Palestine. Partition," he says, "gives us control over the coast of Palestine, large immigration, a Jewish army, and systematic colonization under state control. I do not see partition as the final solution of the Palestine question. Those who reject partition are right in their claim that this country cannot be partitioned because it constitutes one unit." Now, it's important that we're very clear what Ben-Gurion is saying here. It will explain what Zionism aimed to achieve not only during the ethnic cleansing operations that will soon arrive, but the essence of Israeli settler politics to this day. Speaking to the Zionist executive, he proclaimed, "After the formation of a large army in the wake of the establishment of the state, we will abolish partition and expand to the whole of Palestine. A Jewish state is not the end, but the beginning. We shall organize an elite army, and then I am sure that we will not be prevented from settling in other parts of the country. In other words, from the river to the sea, we will colonize all of it." The Commission's partition project failed, but from now, partition would guide future policy tactics. But there was still one big problem for the Zionists. Even if they declared the Jewish state in Palestine, there would still be Arabs inside of it. Thus, the idea of transfer would become a centerpiece of Zionist thinking. Virtually all important Zionists would be in favor of it. The leftist Zionist, Ber Katznelson, one of the most important ideologues of the time, a guy liberals often point to as one of the good ones, would speak at the 20th Zionist conference, quote, "My conscience is completely clear. A distant neighbor is better than a close enemy. They will not lose by their transfer, and we certainly will not. In the final analysis, this is a political reform of benefit to both sides. For a long time, I have been convinced that this is the best solution." Ben-Gurion, in support of Katznelson, says, "The compulsory transfer of the Arabs from the valleys of the proposed Jewish state could give us something we never had. We are given an opportunity which we never dared to dream of in our wildest imaginings." He tells the Zionist Assembly in 1937, quote, "In many parts of the country, it will not be possible to settle."
So, notice that they like to use this word transfer. There's a reason why they like that word, as opposed to what it actually is. And oh, yes. Indeed. But of course, I know that the Zionists will probably say,
I did everything right and they indicted me.
but, we know that, there's something a bit more to it, right? The fact that, any time that, that you're around Zionists, the fact truly is that,
We literally have demons descending on us right now.
so of course. But again, as I said, there's a reason why, you have this, what is this? Oh, do I even want to know? I don't think I want to know. I did everything wrong and they indicted me. But yeah. Okay, so now that I have your attention, so felachin just means like laborers, peasants. But the reason why they like the word transfer is because it seems like a less, I don't know, objectionable way of saying what it is, which is ethnic cleansing. I don't know. For me, I've always been of the, like, I don't know. To me, I've always been like, I don't know. It kind of seems bad in and of itself. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It just seems bad anyway. Just the idea. Okay. So let's see here. Okay, so I think that a good thing to do would be, yes, it's dinner time indeed. So what we are going to do is we are going to raid Talorcs, who I recently did a stream with. So make sure, everybody, thank you so much for being with me in this stream today. I truly appreciate it. Again, I will be here very, very soon. Make sure to get in the machine as we head on over to Talorcs. Make sure to tell them hello and that I will be there soon. And I will see you all very, very, very soon. Bye.